r/AskReddit. Serious, what is the story of death in your school? A student hung himself on a tree by the school entrance during third period. Body was removed by the time classes ended. A few days after, I happened to overhear people from his class talking about how annoying he was to everyone and cringy stuff he had done. This is awfully sad, and many people have this fear that after I die people will only be relieved. I hope the student rests in peace. 2 deaths. One was a kid I hung out with at school sometimes. Not close. He committed suicide, and nobody cared at all. I don't think anyone even knew besides myself and his family, obviously. Teachers said nothing at all. The other death was a very popular student who drunk drove speeding down a rural road, flipped the car and hit a tree, dead. He had just started working at my job as well in a pizza shop for about a week, so I knew him, but obviously not well. The entire school was in mourning. It was the total opposite of my school acquaintance. Kids crying in the hallways, an assembly to announce the funeral, teachers would let kids out of class early, etc. Mostly kids just faking it for attention. I only felt bad for his actual friends, some of which I do call friends myself. His mom went on a crusade to try and get teens banned from driving cars. It wasn't a popular idea. Edit. There was another. I had only thought of students. My school days are a long time ago. A science teacher I had lost his child to cancer. He fell into depression. He stopped teaching his regular classes, and I guess the school put him on light duty of sorts. He just ran the computer labs and assisted other teachers. He looked completely lost in a brain fog for a few months. Very slow to respond. Then he committed suicide. There were a few student deaths when I was in high school, but the teacher death that happened hurt the most. The summer before my senior year of high school, the band teacher died from an unexpected heart attack. It was a really hard time. Most of us knew him since 4th grade or earlier. Since my school district was tiny, he taught both elementary school band and high school band, and he was the one who gave the woodwind and percussion lessons. We got a new band teacher at the start of the year. Very young, though he was married with a kid. He seemed great and supportive, and he pushed us to play our old band teacher's favorite song better than we ever had before. Then halfway through the year, he disappeared. Turned out, he was sleeping with a junior. We had to start all over again. Car accident killing 4 kids from my school. They were speeding and crashed into someone else. Their car flew down a bank and ended up decapitating one kid at the back. Wasn't wearing his seatbelt. A second car was following them with their friends. They stopped and tried to help, but there was nothing to do. One kid was a teacher's kid. The entire school took a day off to go to their funerals. A kid in my class died in a quad bike accident. He used to race and decided at the end of the race to take all his protective gear and do dumb shit before loading his quad on his trailer. A quad flipped on him, crushed his chest and died on the way to the hospital. We've also had a suicide. Our school had accommodations for students living far away. He jumped from the 2nd floor during the weekend. I went to a school where the academic pressure was ducking intense. 2 kids killed themselves and cited the pressure as their reasons for doing it. Teachers gave us all lectures on not putting too much pressure on ourselves. Before assigning the usual crazy amount of homework, please give an example of how much homework they gave. Back in high school, a student died unexpectedly in his sleep. Half a year later, the same thing happened to a teacher, and one of my former college classmates died in a car accident 2 years ago. In 5th grade, a well-liked girl suddenly stopped showing up to class. We learned through our parents that she was staying with her adult sister when her ex-boyfriend broke in and beat them both to death. It was a shit way to die. Classes ground to a halt for a few days because we were a small class and everyone knew her. We've had 2 suicides in the last year. One was a 13-year-old kid who was found after dying in his sleep. They never released the method, but we were all told it was suicide. That was rough, as it was the first death we'd had in our school in about 10 years. The other was 15, and about 8 months later, he took an overdose at a party and phoned his friends and his mum to say goodbye before getting into a taxi. His mum found him in the back of the taxi, and he was in a coma for 2 days before he passed away. He was super popular, a gymnast, a football player, a drummer, but he'd been hiding his depression from everyone. His uncle is one of the deputy heads, who specifically moved to our school to be closer to his family. It was horrible. Oh, there were several. I guess most gruesome was the one where one of the teachers got stabbed multiple times by her ex-husband in front of the school gates. Multiple children ages 7-10 were watching. She collapsed, bled out and died on her way to the hospital. It took them 2 weeks to remove the blood stain from school grounds. Dude got 2 decades in jail. Apparently she kicked him to the curb because he wasn't all there. They left 2 beautiful children. I hope he rots in hell. Hit by a student in a car in the car park was a dark time for the school, as it wasn't the driver's fault, as the kid ran out in front and the driver was only doing 5 miles per hour, but he hit the kid, who then hit his temple on a curb. There was a witch hunt for the driver in school until they released the video footage from one of the security cameras that basically absolved him. Imagine if there were no cameras. This happened when my mom was in school. A middle school girl told the gym teacher she couldn't run because she had a heart condition. The gym teacher made her run anyway and she died right there on the track. Man, that gym teacher should be ashamed of themselves. When I was 16, one of the kids 2 grades younger than me got raped and subsequently murdered by a child molester one weekend. It was a big school, so I can't say I ever personally knew anything about her, but it shocked pretty much everyone that it happened. When I was younger, there was this Vietnamese family that lived a few houses from us. I was friends with their kids. Their father was an abusive, unemployed alcoholic who would regularly beat his kids. One night he came home from drinking. He had a jerrycan full of gasoline which he proceeded to pour on himself, and then he lit himself on fire. He was suffering from depression due to his employment status. The next few days in my school bus he was the talk of the school. I talked to the man's kids about it and they responded with, "Yeah, dad's dead." I mean, it is kinda sad. Those kids had no love for their dad. You could see the burn mark from his melted sandals for a few days on top of the manhole where he burned himself. Edit. Grammar error. Girl sat next to me and was my partner for French class. The next year, she was dating someone from another local school district who apparently snapped after a breakup, went to her house with a shotgun and killed her on her doorstep. He later got into a standoff with the police at his own house and shot himself in his room. The funeral was just awful. She had a huge support group of friends and almost the entire high school showed up to pay their respects. It's incredibly sobering being at the funeral of someone younger than you. She was a very sweet girl, incredibly quiet, but never would have hurt anyone or anything. In elementary school, about 20 years ago, jawbreakers were an up-and-coming candy, kind of frowned upon by everyone as they were a huge choking hazard. The main ones were about 3 centimeters, so most kids would buy and eat these in secrecy. The gas station 50 meters from my school sold them, basically to anyone. So this one day, a girl from my class went to the bathroom to, which we would later find out, secretly eat one of those jawbreakers. Instead she started to choke on it, causing her to fall down and smash her head on the toilet seat. She passed right there on the spot. Another girl from my class found her a few minutes after that when she didn't come back. We were about 7 or 8 at the time, so the realization of what actually had happened was not really there, but we knew something really bad had just happened. It was all over the news and was a hot topic at the school for many years after. When I was in 7th grade, one of 2 Latin teachers in our middle school committed suicide. Nobody knew how to tell us that at the time, so they just said she passed away. Nothing got done in any of our classes that day, and it was right before Thanksgiving break. They didn't confirm it was suicide until a few weeks later, but I was told from my drum teacher, who worked with the school, that they all knew. Apparently it just came out of nowhere. Nobody knew what she had been dealing with or was planning or even suspected anything. Likely because she was one of the most liked teachers at the time. Seeing 7th graders consoling teachers was a wild sight, cause they lost a friend and co-worker too. When I was in high school, a kid accidentally died when he crashed a 4x4 while drunk. He was a football player, very popular, good looking, and overall someone that made the school look good. After his death, the school had flyers, an assembly, a moment of silence, a slideshow celebrating his life. etc. Basically, they went all out for him. But about a year later, another kid died. He killed himself because of his mental illness and how much he was bullied. However, after his death, the school did nothing for him. No flyers, no slideshow, no moment of silence, nothing. They believed that if people found out that he killed himself because of how he was treated in their school on their watch, it would make them look bad. So they tried to keep it quiet and let it blow over. But people got pissed at the school for handling the two deaths differently just to protect their image. After a couple days, the only thing the school did was announce the date of his funeral. No moment of silence. Nothing. The junior class held a memorial by themselves, with no aid from the school. No one from the faculty showed up. Needless to say, no one respects that fucking shithole anymore. My high school had 5 people die in separate intoxicated driving accidents. 2 brothers were shot a year apart, which is unusual in the quiet, suburban neighborhood. 1 kid raped and killed his underage neighbor, and several overdosed. I was only there 2 years. I know of a few deaths in my previous schools. The first was in secondary school, ages 11-16, where a boy who had been suffering from a chronic illness, I can't remember what exactly, suddenly passed away one weekend. The school planted a bush that flowered in his favorite color, yellow, because it was so happy, in his honor. He was a really lovely guy. We all mourned his loss, even those who didn't really know him. The other 2 were 2 girls who were part of the running team at my 6th form, ages 16-18. I didn't know them, but my closest friend of the time did because she ran with them. Well, what happened was during a warm-up for running practice, the group would normally run about a mile around the surrounding estate. These 2 girls went together, and as they were running down a road, a drunk driver, military on leave, lost control while speeding around 50 miles per hour in a 30 mile per hour zone and hit them. They both died. Again, the school planted a memorial tree as tribute and held an on-site memorial service for those that knew them. It's sad and very sobering when someone so young dies so easily, especially when you're the same age at the time. It makes you realize how fragile we really are. One of my classmates was driving himself and his little brother home after school one afternoon. Crossing a busy highway, they got T-boned, and that was that. It was a small town and small school, so everybody knew everybody. I had a classmate, who was also my boyfriend, who died in a plane crash, just few weeks after we graduated high school. He was loved by everyone in the class, and we had even made a large crowdfund in the class to get him his graduation cap. Well, the Danish equivalent thereof. They're crazy expensive, and he couldn't afford one. So we all got together and bought one for him as a surprise. Loads of people showed up for the funeral, from classmates to former teachers. It was absolutely devastating to have lost such an amazing guy. A girl in my school accidentally shot herself in the head while she was joking around with a gun. She thought she was holding an unloaded one. She died on the spot before the ambulance could get to her. Her sister was in the room with her, and she is getting treated for PTSD. In my senior year of high school, our principal killed himself in his garage. Carbon monoxide poisoning. As you'd guess, the whole school was completely broken at his loss. He was so committed to the students and loved his job. The sweetest man you'd ever meet. There was an incident a few weeks earlier where someone who was not a student brought a gun to a school function, and there was a lot of controversy about it. It makes me wonder if his job may have been on the line, and having loved his job so much, killed himself as an alternative to being fired. Very sad. A quiet, awkward kid who had special needs and bullied for it was riding his bike home one evening on some trails and carrying a knife. He rapped and the knife went into his chest. I didn't know him too well, but we had mutual friends. Afterwards, all the crying and sadness expressed by the kids who had made fun of him was gross. My school was for disabled people. It was also a mix of nursery playgroup, infant school, junior school, and secondary schools. So there were all ages in that place. The worst disabilities are the ones you can't see. One of my BFFs was born with 3 holes in her heart, 1 working lung, and she had Perth's disease, which is where the hips gradually waste away. My first 2 years there saw my crush, who had cystic fibrosis, die after he rejected his heart and double lung transplant. He was 18 years old. Then I noticed little 6-year-old Gemma hadn't been coming for her story at dinner time. She slipped into a coma over the weekend and died 2 weeks later. One little lad fell down in the school playground and didn't get back up. We were all ushered into the school, but it didn't make any difference. We all knew what those diseases meant if you hit the ground. John died, then Louise, then somebody else and somebody else after that. I attended 6 funerals in the span of 18 months at once point, and I hadn't even reached the age of 16. My school's Facebook page is part selling page for one former student's MLM, but nobody complains because it's something that isn't an obituary and notice of death. There have been a few. A girl who was supposed to graduate with us this year died of leukemia when we were in 6th grade. She was very sweet and a close friend of mine. A boy, about to enter his senior year, accidentally shot himself in the face while cleaning his gun. A boy in my class, also supposed to graduate, huffed aerosol and died. A boy who had transferred to a different school in our county was playing chicken, where a car drives toward you and you jump away at the last second, and got hit and killed. A freshman was pinned behind a delivery truck and bled to death. A boy in my class was shot. A girl who was actually a grade below me but did PLC and was going to graduate this year overdosed and was abandoned in her car. Her grandparents who she lived with found her, still in the car, the next morning, dead and alone in their driveway.